Good everyone. I hope you're having an amazing day. So in the last episode, right, I talked about how to configure, SSO between two Salesforce org, which is pretty cool, right? So this specific org acts as a service provider, and this org acts like an IDP, right, identity provider. Okay, so today I'm gonna build a SAML Jit handler. So what that will do, right? So I'll give you a scenario in the first. So I have a user here, right? Say this is the main org, say which is based in New Zealand, and so I have my username here, which is pretty much you can assume that it's the same username which I use to log into my computer, right? And which is hosted in Active AD Azure, right? So let's not get into Azure for now, but just assume that that's the same username. I use it for Salesforce, right? And so I have my roles. So for instance, let's go to the user here, right? And so I go to my user here. So I use this same username to log into all other service providers because I don't want it to remember different passwords, right? That's the reason why I built a single sign-on. Okay, now I want one thing to happen, right? Let's say, for instance, if my role changed, right? Let's say if I get promoted to CEO, right? I don't want to go to each and every org to change it manually, right? I want the stuff to happen behind the scene automatically, right? So in that case, I'm going to use the SAML Jit handler to do that, right? This is very simple scenario I'm talking about, right? You can have a scenario where you have an Azure single sign-on, right? And you are logging to using your Azure AD, and you might be an external user, right? Who's wanted to sign in using a community page. So what happens is that when you log in, right, if there's no user creator, it creates behind the scene using a SAML Jit handler. It assigns all the permission set license, permission set, permissions to group, whatever, right? So I'm not going to do that here. I'm going to build a very simple Jit handler just to give you an idea how to implement it, right? Then you can go ahead and implement whatever you want. You can build your own advanced complex solution, right? So just to give you a glimpse how it works. Okay, I hope that's clear. All right, so this is my service provider org. So I'll do SSO, and it will take me to this to my org, right? I mean, since I've already logged in, so it will take you to that. Okay, that sounds pretty cool, right? Now, what I wanted to do, I wanted to build a SAML Jit handler. Okay, but before that, I need to know what attributes I'm getting from a SAML file, right? That's very important. Without knowing that, I can't build the solution, right? So what I'm after, so I'm after only one extra attribute. That's the role, right? That's all I'm after. I mean, you can configure other stuff, but just to say, for the sake of simplicity, the requirement is if the role changes, right, in the main IDP, it should get propagated, right? Just the role. Okay. Now I'm not sure if this SAML what I configure, right, is getting a role from a user object. Okay, so we have to test that. Okay, so how to test that? It's pretty simple. So let's start with a basic interface, right? SAML code, right? So for that, go to developer console. I'm in HTTP, right? Sorry, not the IDP org, right? I'm in a sorry. So I'm just gonna close all of it right now. So let's me go to new. So because you can't write your SAML handler on an IDP, right? It has to be on the other side of the thing, right? You can't write on an identity provider because that doesn't make sense, right? Identity provider actually gives you the attributes, right? So that's one of the thing you have to keep into consideration, because what happens is, right, if you're gonna write on IDP, right, then it won't work. It has to be on the service provider. So that's exactly what I'm doing. This is a service provider org. Okay, so this is a service provider org which I configured to have SSO. So let's build it. So I'm gonna put SSO SAML, right? It's gonna say okay, we're doing coding today, so which is exciting, right? So that's my favorite part. So just gonna do global. People say architects don't code. I like, says who, right? I code. I love to code, right? Because how will you build a proof of concept if you do not know how to code, right? Unless you're a functional architect, then it's a different story. So I'm gonna implement this should be a global class, right? It will implement SAML Jit handler. So let's say Jit handler. I hope I spelled correctly. My spelling sucks, so my apologies for that. So let me save this. So I will complain because it says, oh, you got to implement create a user and update a user. Okay, so let's implement that. So I've done this so many times. So you know, I worked with SAML interface before, so Jit handler. So I know the it's very conveniently. So I will say SAML. So you have to have SAML SSO provider ID, and then you have ID community ID, then you have ID portal ID, right? Then you have string federation. I'm not going to do anything with the create user because the user is already there, right? So this is very handy, this method, but you know, this is a method which they want you to implement it because you know this interface expects you to implement it, and if you don't, it will not let you save it. So okay, so for now I'll just put return null. Okay, let's see if it works and what happens. Okay, so that means the create user is fine. Okay, so now we need to implement the other one. So I'll copy this because I don't want it to, you know. So then I'm gonna do update user. So this is a bit different. So you need to have ID, user ID, SAML provider, community provider. Right, so I think it should be fine. Now return null because we're just doing void. Okay. Right, these are the two methods which you should implement. So it looks correct, right? No problem. So my apologies in advance. I'm going to write the business logic inside, but in reality, right, you shouldn't be doing so, right? You should have a separate interface and you just call it, because then the testing will get easier, right? I've seen people writing, you know, the pile of the business logic crap inside the same code. That's the garbage code, right? I mean, I don't like that code, right? You know, if it comes to me for a code review, just straight away say, go and do it, redo again, right? I don't care. I mean, people come to me and say, oh, it takes too much of time. Well, yeah, it doesn't matter. You should have thought about it in the first place, right? So, yeah. Sorry, at times I do get mean, but, you know, when you're paying money to do something for, you know, then you got to do it in the right way. Otherwise, you know, don't bother working for someone. So, yeah. Okay, so we're going to do, I will test it, right? Update Jit attributes, because I wanted to know, first of all, what all the attributes is returning, right? Because I don't know if it's returning a profile attribute. If it's not returning a profile attribute, then we have to build a custom profile attribute, right? Otherwise, I can't assume that. And I also don't know what's the name of the key which comes from this attributes, right? So what I'll do, I'll keep this, and right, and I'll go here, and so we will do, just gonna go to SSO, single sign-on, and I'm just gonna go to single sign-on settings. It's gonna take a time. Edit, user provision enabled. Just gonna do that. So you see the custom SAML Jit with Apex handler. You enable this. I'm just gonna go look for SSO SAML. Hopefully I can find it. All right, you choose that and execute hat. I'll just run as me, right? It doesn't matter. Gonna save. Okay, that's pretty cool, right? So now I want to get the debug logs. I don't care about the debug logs, so oh man, this is garbage. There are too many logs there. Okay, so what I'll do, I'll go to edit, and I'll activate this debug logs today. I don't want it for a long time, so probably I will do for 35. That's good enough. Okay, so what I'll do, I'm just gonna log off, right, and I'll log in back in. Okay, so because I need to know what attribute is returning. Okay, that's fine, not a problem. Right, that's not a problem. So I'll just say log out. Okay, so what I'll do, I will run this again. Not this one. So I will do this. So this is the URL for to get into the single sign-on for the service provider, and I'll click on SSO, and it will take me to the other login for the other IDP. Alright, okay, so that's fine. Now we got to look at the debug logs to see what attributes we're getting. Based on that, we can configure it. So we're gonna go debug logs, yeah, and so alright, we got one. I got download, and I will see if I got something. So I will just look for alright, so we are getting only these two attributes, these attributes, right? Which is not great, because I'm after what's that called, roles, right? So there's no roles coming from here, which is not good. So we need to add the custom attributes, right? So now how you must be thinking how to add it. So for that, we need to go to the main org, identity provider. Okay, so go to the so what I'll do, go to the go to the app manager, right? And so when we go to app manager, we go to the connected apps, manage, and there's a custom attribute section here, right? That's what we're after. So click on new. I'm just gonna put user or role, right? You can type whatever you want. Enter field. So I'm gonna go to user role. I'm gonna put name. Enter. Yeah. Save. Okay. Fantastic. Right. Now what I'll do, I will delete it. Yeah. And I will hopefully log out. Log out. Okay, that's fine. Okay, so I will do this again. Try to do SSO service provider org. That's what we are dealing with, right? So you must be thinking what I've done so far, right? So I went to IDP, identity provider org, which is this org, and I've added the custom attributes under the connected app. So using this connected app, we have actually configured a single sign-on for this service provider, right? Now, since we are not getting any the role information, so I've added a custom attribute, right? This is how you add a custom attribute. In Azure, it's a different story, right? You can do that in Azure as well, but from between Salesforce to Salesforce, this is how we do it. Okay, all right. Now let's look at the debug logs, okay, and then we see how it happens. This is the way you can, troubleshoot, right? I'm just telling you, if someone tells you, see the role, so CFO, okay, so we're getting the role to CFO, which is fantastic. So this is what we are after. Okay, now let's start building. All right, so we got what we wanted. So the attributes is great. Now what we do, so since we are only after role, so what I'll do, I'll just say if, come on, if attributes dot contains key, right? Just say user dot role, right? Then we're gonna do it's fantastic, this one, right? Obviously, what's the name of the attribute, right? It has to be exactly correct, exactly same. User dot role. For some reason it's not saving. Okay, let's see if I can save it. Fantastic. Okay, that's fine. I will close it and I will open it again. Right. Right. Let's close all. I'm just gonna go to open class SSO SAML. Right, this is already after. So I will do if attributes dot contains key, right? So that is user dot role. Okay, and right, and so we can say if it contains, then what we do, we will do string role name equals to attributes dot get user dot role ID. Like I said, this is not a very good way to code because first of all, I don't like the magical strings, right? It's floating around, it's duplicated. It should goes into a constant class, right? And you should reuse it, right? That's my approach. Because because what happens, right? Imagine, the user dot role name get changed to something else. You have to change it in if it's 50 different places, you have to change in 50 different places. But if you're using a constant class, right, where you have to change it just one place, so that's a good way to code, right? Because I'm an old school, right? I like to code in a very systematic manner. I don't like things floating around, copy paste from this and that. That's just a garbage code, right? Let's accept the fact. So user role, so R equals to select ID from user role, where name equals to role name, and so we get that u dot user role ID or dot ID, right? So you have to configure. So one thing, you just have to make sure that the role names, right, are common across your service provider org, right? It might be the case you may not have it, so it can lead to an error, right? Okay, so now what's the problem here? Variable does not exist. Okay, right. Oh, sorry. All right, now this is great. Now we have to make sure one more thing, that is user. We haven't user us equals to select ID from user, where ID equals to user ID. Yeah, so in this case we will do u dot the role ID, that is user role ID equals to r dot ID. Let's see if it works. Okay, it doesn't work. Yeah, because again I get confused. Yeah, that's right. All right, now update US, right? Okay. So what I'm doing is pretty straightforward, right? I'm just getting a user based on the ID what we get, because this is an update user. That means we are assuming that user exists. If it's a new user, it goes to the create user. So like I said, right, I already have a user in both the systems, right, in both the org, so I don't have to worry about the creating a user. But that may not be the case in your case, because you might be getting an external user, right, getting logged in using SSO. So you have to keep it in consideration. But for this specific tutorial, I'm only focusing on update user, right? So I'm getting a user based on the user ID. So this is a user object. Now we have debugged this attributes to figure out we are getting a user.role, right? So the user.role is a key, and the CFO, if you remember, that is the value, right? So I'm after that value, the string.role name, and I'm actually querying the ID based on that name and assigning it to this specific role ID for this user. That's pretty much what I'm doing, right? Nothing fancy here. Okay, let's go to the org, the service provider org. So I'm going to delete it. Okay, let's go to the user, right? And let's do a change to the user here. And so let's do some change here, right? So that will make it easier. So let's edit. So I will make it to CFO here, okay, just to make it consistent, so I can replicate it. So it's my role is the CFO here, and in IDP, let's see what's my role here. Okay, so my role in IDP is CFO. Okay, so that's great. So what I'll do, I will close this. Okay, and this is the IDP, right, identity provider. So I will change it to CO here. Okay, so let's say I got promoted to CO, right? Pretty good position, right? That's awesome. So and then I go to the service provider to log in, right? Say for instance this is based in Spain, right? So and I've logged in. I haven't used a single sign-on here, so I might have to log out, right? So what I'll do, I will do the single sign-on again. So I'll do SSO. Okay, now let's see if my role has been changed from CFO to CEO on this org as well. Okay, so if not, we'll figure out why. Voila, right? So it's propagated the change. Okay, so let's test it one more time, right? Let's log out. Okay, all right, I'm just gonna log out, and let's propagate the change. Let's say CEO is got wanted to go back to CFO, right? CEO decided, CEO role is too boring, I don't like the CEO role, I'm happy being a CFO, right? So decide to change it back in the IDP. This is an IDP org. Okay, now I'm gonna do a single sign-on here. So this is a different org, the train dev, okay? And this is a different org, okay? You see the URL is pretty different, right? So don't think that they are the same org. This is an IDP, so the org name is different, train. So this is because company here, okay? So go to user and go to edit CFO, voila, right? So that's my JIT handler in place, right? You can extend it, like I said, you can do other stuff. You can, pretty much add federation ID change, a lot of things you can do, right? This is just a glimpse of what a JIT handler can do, right? I've demonstrated. So, if you're someone who wants to know how the JIT handler works, so this video will definitely help you, right? To get you that kick, to head start. So yeah, that's pretty much what I wanted to talk about, today. So I hope you enjoyed it. So I'm gonna bring more changes in the next episode around Azure single sign-on, and we can do something around Azure SAML, right, to extend this SAML Jit handler. So things are gonna get excited, right? As I said, identity series would be a bit longer, and once the identity series is completed, I'm gonna start with Einstein, right? I'm gonna focus more on machine learning sides. Not gonna talk about deep learning, right? I do know deep learning, right? Neural networks and that aspect, but it's not relevant to Einstein. Okay, that's being said, you guys have a great weekend. Cheers. Adios.